Hello guys, and welcome to this new video. So today as a feature game we'll watch for the round 8 of the Russian chess championship a game between Motylev and Khismatullin. Denis Khismatullin again playing the most entertaining game of the day. It's I guess the third time maybe already out of 8 rounds, if not the fourth. So let's go, let's proceed with the game. We have a lot to watch. So e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, pawn d4, knight takes d4, all that is well-known theory. Knight f6, knight c3, and now we finally see a Najdorf, pawn to a6. So this variation is named the Najdorf. There is a lot of theory to know if you want to play that either with white, either with black. Myself, I'm playing the move rook g1 to answer this a6 move. This is a little subline that is not really recommended to play, but it's just a chance not to go to the big theory. Motylev goes bishop g5, knight bd7, so this is all theoretical. Bishop c4, pawn to h6, bishop h4. So we see that white bring the bishop on a good square. The bishop on g5. For the moment, black only developed 2 pieces, but with the move a6, we prepare to storm like b5, bishop b7, and knight c5 or knight e5 coming. It's really complicated, guys. There are 10 of thousands, if not 100 of thousands hours spent by people analyzing those lines. So it's very concrete. Here black plays the move g6, so preparing to fianchetto the bishop, a bit like in a dragon. Queen to e2, bishop g7, white long castle, black short castle, so we have the opposite castle king. So this is going to be firework again. And just like to say that I said that when Svidler long castle against Khismatullin, it's really dangerous against this guy to go in such a position, because this guy, Denis, is really to checkmate you and to bring out some crazy attacks. Yesterday he sacked the queen for initiative. Against Svidler he played an amazing game. And here Motylev is very brave to go with the opposite castle. But is he brave or is he crazy? We will know this a bit later. So he went here pawn to f4 and queen c7. So here I think it's not theory anymore. At least I don't have any more games in the 2014 database. So this is a pretty classical position. So as I said, black is preparing b5, bishop b7, rook c8, knight c5, adding a pressure on the c file, on the e4 pawn, and on the knight on c3 at some point. And white is going to launch a pawn storm on the king side. So black here decided to play the move f5. The move f5 means 2 things. The first one is that you want to trade the f pawn against the g pawn, so you are attacking the pawn as the f pawn is pinned. If white takes on g6, black will not be able to retake because the bishop is just eating the king. But you are giving up the e5 square, so your control on the very important central square, and somehow the control of the long diagonal is a bit worse, as you don't control the e5 square as good as before. Instead of f5, he could have played the bishop to f3, pawn b5, pawn g4, bishop b7, pawn g5, pawn g5, and bishop g5, knight c5. White could have opened like that the g file, but white would have an annoying threat on e4. So it was just another line, another possibility of playing this attack on the king side for white. So he played f5. Here black plays a move that is very thematical, and it's really a move that you should fire even in blitz. The move g5. Why is g5 a good move? Because the idea of white is to open files, any file in fact. You want to open any file, sorry, the f file, the g file. Any pawn exchange is good for them. So pushing the pawn, somehow there is no play on the diagonal now. So it's not really weakening those 2 squares, because anyway it's really hard to see for the moment those pawns disappearing. So it's a good defensive move. Here white played bishop g3. with the idea to go h4 next. He could also have played the bishop on f2 with a slightly different idea. Let's just have a look together, because it was the other possibility to develop the attack. So b5, bishop b3, bishop b7, all that is logical. Pawn to g4, stopping the pawn from advancing. Knight to c5, attacking the pawn on e4. Pawn to h4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, pawn takes g5. So we want to play, if pawn takes g5, I guess we could play a move like rook h5. So we force black to take her exchange. Now we take the pawn on g6. He takes back, and we play the move g5. So I went till this position here. It's very complicated. The thing is that white opens up two files. Wants at least opened one. Wants to has another one opened. The computer gives an advantage to black after the move bishop a4, if I remember well. But this is very complicated, and white could have gone for this line. Well, it would have been interesting, and we would need to analyze that with a computer or for quite a long time to understand the in and the outs. But white refused to go with these attacks, so bring the bishop to f2 in order to play g4, h4. This is the light chess, maybe you heard that. So white went bishop g3, committing itself to play h4 without playing g4. The upside of this move is that your bishop is looking at the queen, and maybe you want to play e5 a bit later, or at least, well, it's a better place for the bishop for the time being. So black goes b5, bishop b3, bishop b7. So as we said, it's logical. So we want to attack the e4 pawn, bring the knight on c5, bring the rook on c8. White goes here h4. So he wants to open up the h files. The h file, as said Bobby Fischer, if you open up the h file, it's 1-0 because you're gonna checkmate your opponent. And so black plays again a very thematical move, pawn to g4. So he's doing everything to close the files, and as you see now, the h pawn cannot exchange itself, and the g pawn cannot exchange itself as well. So white plays here the move h5, and will try to play against the two weaknesses, which are h6 and g4. In fact, it will be hard to attack the h6 pawn, because after king h7, the pawn will be well protected, as the long diagonal is, as this diagonal b1 h7 is for the moment closed. So black goes knight to c5. It's the logical idea of attacking the e4 pawn. And white pushes the pawn to e5. So as you see, he's starting to open up this diagonal. And also is protecting its pawn. So pawn e5, pawn takes e5, bishop takes e5, queen b6, queen b6. So what do we see? What just happened is that we traded all those pawns in the center, the d6 pawn against the e4 pawn. So now the power of the bishop is looking even mightier. This bishop on g7 is well blocked by the bishop on e5 for the moment. So those two guys are like neutralizing each other. White still has the plan to go to eat the pawn in order to continue his play on the queen side, on the king side, and black is looking to play a4, a5, a4, or b5, b4, rook c8, and the attack is going quicker than one might think, because every time you push pawns with black, you are straining pieces. So this is the reason why it's like accelerating the black storm that is coming in this position. White here played rook h4. He could have played, I watched a bit, bishop takes f6 was interesting, queen f6, queen takes g4, so winning a pawn. But here rook d, after rook d8, white is a pawn up, but still the file is not open. It's just winning. We just want a pawn, but black has the control on the two long diagonals, and the rook is well placed in the center. I think this position in fact favors black. It's more easy to play with black because it's not clear how you really attack the king that is on g8, though the play for black is really clear, bringing a crook on the other file, pushing the pawns, and attacking those two weaknesses. So that's why Motylev didn't take the pawn on g4 with the exchange of the bishop against the knight, but went rook to h4. So he's planning to give up an exchange to win this pawn, but then he will neutralize this dark square bishop that is a monster on the long diagonal. Such a good defender and such a good attacker. So rook h4, king h7. So it's a good square for the king, going away from this bishop, protecting the pawn, and going away from the g file. So rook takes g4. This is the idea, like you have to do that now. Knight g4, bishop g7, and here black played king g7, and he missed a computerish line, which is knight takes b3. Now, if knight takes b3, queen e3 check, queen takes, knight takes, and this is easy. So I mean, this is just an exchange up in an endgame with some weak pawns, really advanced pawns that will be attacked by the king, by the bishop, and by the rook. So this is the easy thing to do, is that after knight takes b3, if knight takes, queen e3 check. This I'm sure Denis saw in like half a second. The idea behind knight b3 is that after a takes b3, so this is the logical move, black has a very cool idea, which is rook g8. And the thing after rook g8 is that you have to take the knight, and the rook takes on g7. The king is safe. Again, you cannot take the very important e4 square, it's covered. So the king is okay, and on the next move you will be able to take the g2 pawn and bring another rook to g8, and this is like game over. But this is really hard to find the move. Let me go back to the right position. The move rook g8. I mean, this is really not logical. Like you can take the bishop, but I mean, you are not calculating every single knight move like rook g8, and the bishop doesn't have a good square to retreat, and then on the next move you can hit it with the rook. Pretty hard to find. So bishop g7, king g7, queen g4, king to h8. So now we'll bring the queen to f6, so the king is safe on the diagonal, it's okay. Queen to e2, coming back. Knight takes b3, knight takes b3. So now you see we don't have anymore the queen e3 check. And queen f6. So the queen is on a good square, pulling the king, looking on this long diagonal again. Also, we might have the idea to come to g5, giving a check and looking at some pawns. So a perfect move. Knight a5, queen g5 check, and here white goes rook d2, because after king b1 we are just losing the g2 pawn. Now there is no attack anymore on the king side, so eating pawns is always a good idea, as we always have control of files. I mean, there are no more attacks on the open files because we have 2 rook against 1, so we always have an advantage when we talk about files now with black. So we can easily take the pawn without any second thoughts, and just start to grab the pawns and win the endgame at the end. So white goes rook d2, protecting the pawn. Pawn to b4, attacking the knight. And here white would better have gone knight d1, but he went knight a4. And now after bishop d5, so the bishop is attacked. No, let's not forget that. Those two knights are so far away from the game. I mean, the game is at least in the center for white. At least you need to control the center, and better if you can attack this king, because you need to find counterplay. You have material problems, like you're an exchange down, so you need to attack your opponent. And now your two knights are on the edge of the board. So it's hard to recyclate the knight. White decides to play the move c4. so that after pawn takes c3, knight takes c3, the knight comes back on the more natural square. So decent idea. Now black goes rook a c8. So finally bringing the rook on the open file. It happened only on the 29 move. So here after king b1, if you want to drag the king away on b1, black goes queen takes f5, king a1, and bishop takes a2. And the thing is that when you retake the bishop, you are losing your knight on a5. So white will be an exchange and a pawn down. So you cannot play king b1. He goes king d1. It already smells pretty bad for white now. Rook to d8. So we bring the rook in front of the king. Now, if you go knight takes d5, it's met by rook takes d5, and when you think, oh god, I just want a free piece, the rook lands on c1, and this is a checkmate. So rook f d8, protecting the bishop, king e1. So now white is straining the bishop again, queen h4 check, queen f2, queen h1 check, queen f1, queen takes queen, so we go to the endgame. We take the pawn on a2. And can now someone tells me what happens after rook takes, and knight a2? You have 10 seconds to find how black saved the day if rook takes rook, and knight takes bishop. It's 10 seconds from now. Okay, the thing is that if you take the rook, so he took the rook, rook takes, and now white went knight c6, and the thing is really pretty. If you go knight a2, it's made by rook d1 check, so taking the king, king e2, and rook a1, getting getting an x-ray on this knight and winning back the piece. So rook take d8, you have to go, I mean you move the knight, so he attacks the rook, the bishop, and the pawn. Black goes bishop c4, intermediary move, check, king e1, rook d3. So if knight takes e7 here, rook e3 check, winning the knight back. So white goes king f2, rook d2 check, king e3, rook takes b2, knight e5, and bishop b3. So you're never going to attack this king, and the pawn is just driving. And well, when you have an exchange up in an endgame and you have a pass pawn, usually it's game over. And now we are even a pawn and an exchange up, threatening even the g2 pawn, pushing your a pawn. So Motylev resigned, and Khismatullin won another good game. So yesterday he lost after his queen sack. He could have won the game if he found the right moves. And today it's as his game against Svidler, where he totally destroyed him in an opposite castle position. He did exactly the same to Motylev, and really played a convincing attacking game. So good game. Let's go to our second game of the day. This is the game between Peter Svidler and Nikita Vitiugov. So we are already just out of the opening. It's white to play, and here white plays the move e4. So again, the king is in the center. You want to open up the center, so we go e4, pawn takes e4, pawn takes e4, knight takes e4. So we just gave a pawn. Knight d4, we thread the bishop and the knight. So if black retreat the bishop, we are just winning a piece, isn't it? So black is forced to play knight takes c3, pawn takes c3, bishop g6, and here we go rook e1. So adding up pressure on the bishop on e7. So you see it's already a 5-move variation. Black is forced to castle. And here you have 5 seconds to find how we win back our pawn with white. So 5 seconds from now. And so white has this beautiful bishop takes c6. So now if pawn takes c6, knight takes c6, and we thread the queen and the bishop, this is a fork, and we are winning back not even only one pawn, but 2 pawns. So bishop c6, threading the pawn, queen c8, and here Svidler decided to play bishop b7, winning the pawn. We will see later why I'm not convinced it was the best move. I would personally have gone rook to e7, pawn c6, and bishop f4, trying to use the activity of the rook and the bishop. Well, white is slightly better, and I like the fact that I am the one trying to win material and keep the activity with the white pieces. So, I mean, this is more about my style of play maybe, but it's like putting the man under a decision. It's like I feel in those positions you have more chance to drive your opponent to make mistakes. The way Svidler played is good as well. Queen takes, rook takes c7. So he's a pawn up, but the thing is that his bishop is not suited to defend the king. And you know, when we have opposite colored bishop in a game, it always favors the attack for both players. And here we have opposite colored bishop plus a weird pawn structure around the white king. So this is a kind of a good compensation, strategical compensation, long-term compensation for black for this exchange. So black went rook e8, queen e2, so we thread this rook for the queen, and the move queen to d5. So centralizing the queen, always a good thing to do. Like you are looking at a lot of square with your queen, it's kind of controlling the board. Bishop to e3. So putting the knight in some variations, and you need to bring your bishop somewhere. Knight to e5. So maybe now we want to enter in a lot of squares. So now we play bishop f4, winning a tempo. And the thing now is that if black wants to keep the knight on the board with knight d3, it's met by queen d6. As all the queen exchange favors white, black has to refuse. And by example, rook to b1. And the thing is that it's hard for this black knight to come back into the game to attack the king. Like the e1 square, impossible, e5 square, impossible. You can only go on c5, so go away from the place where the game is played. And so that's why we don't, Vitiugov didn't decide to go knight d3, but trade the pieces. Even if when you attack you want to keep the pieces on the board, here it's better just to exchange this strong knight against this knight that would have become a bit weaker on d3. So knight f3 check, knight takes f3, and queen takes f3. Look at that, the queen is perfectly placed, and here black wants to play bishop to e4. So white goes rook e1, total control on the e file. Pawn to h5. So don't forget that we also threaded queen e8 checkmate. So pawn to h5, giving a square to the king and bringing a new piece to the attack. Never forget that the pawn might be an attacking piece as well. White goes pawn to c4, pulling the pawn. Could have played queen e3, queen c6, h4 to stop the pawn, and rook to d8. Was also playable, but it seems hard to defend this pawn and this king. Like you will have to give one of them. I mean, it's pretty clear for me that white has no chance to win the game here. Really, I mean, this pawn, I mean, the rook comes on d3, the bishop comes to e4 at some point, and your king is pretty much surrounded. I don't think it's possible to keep all those weaknesses without losing anything. So white went pawn to c4, so it's trying to keep the pawn. Pawn to h4 now, threading h3. So white react with queen e2. Queen e2 is like signing a draw. We'll see why in a second. He could have tried queen e3, but it seems he was scared of queen c6. The difference is when you are on e2, you protect the pawn. Pawn c5, keeping the pawn, and pawn to h3. String checkmate, and pawn to f3. The only way to protect the checkmate on g2. But here I totally understand Svidler, even if the computer prefers white, I would not feel comfortable playing with white here. I would maybe even be more comfortable playing as black here. Because you just make a mistake with white and it's game over, you are checkmated. If you make a mistake with black, nothing is over. So the price of the mistake is way higher for white here than for black. That's why I just went queen e2. So now queen takes e2, rook takes e2, bishop d3, rook b2, pawn takes, and bishop takes c4, winning the pawn. And so now they have these rules, they cannot agree for the draw too quickly. So they just played rook b8 check, take, bishop takes a2, bishop takes a7. I'm pretty sure most of you could make a draw against either Peter Svidler or either Nikita Vitiugov in this position. So just went bishop b3, just showing the last move repetition, as they cannot offer the draw before the 40 moves. They just decided to repeat the moves. So it was an interesting draw, an interesting game as well between Svidler and Vitiugov. Not that it was no fireworks, no crazy sacks, no crazy checkmates, but a really interesting strategical battle. So let's go to watch the standings. And so today the only resultative game was between Motylev and Khismatullin, the one we saw, with the win of Khismatullin, so against Motylev with the black pieces. All the other games were drawn and not really exciting to say the truth. So yesterday it was a very exciting game, a lot of fire on the boards. Today it was a rainy day, or even a snowing day, even if it's August. A bit boring, though we found a good game. In the standings, so Tomaszewski still on the lead, Vitiugov, Koryakin just half a point away, and well, Yakovenko, the top seed, still just within a pawn from catching Tomaszewski. If we go a bit more down in the standings, we see that Svidler is only on 50% still. Will be hard, as we said yesterday, to come back, and he maybe missed half or quarter of a chance today with white against Vitiugov. And the favorite player on this video recap, Khismatullin, is 10 out of 12 with 3 pawns out of 8. But if there was a standing about excitement you give to the people watching, he would probably be on the top of the table. So thank you very much for watching this video, and well, see you tomorrow for the 9th round. Bye.